Result: in today's landscape, discussions of trillion-dollar corporations inevitably lead us to titans like Apple, Microsoft, and Saudi Aramco entities that command stock markets, influence global economies, and drive technological advancement. However, over 400 years ago, long before the emergence of contemporary capitalism, there existed a corporation of such magnitude, wealth, and power that it dwarfs even today's giants. This was the Dutch East India Company, known as the VOC, a corporation whose value, when adjusted for inflation, exceeds an astonishing **7.9 trillion. To comprehend how the VOC ascended to such unparalleled dominance, we must journey back to early 17th century Europe, a continent rife with conflict, rivalry, and an urgent quest for control over the vast riches of the East. Spices such as pepper, cloves, cinnamon, and nutmeg, alongside luxurious textiles like silk and cotton, represented the most coveted commodities on the planet. The nation that mastered this trade wielded unparalleled power, leading to wars, maritime disasters, and immense loss of life in pursuit of these resources. During this tumultuous period, the Netherlands, a relatively small nation striving for independence from the formidable Spanish Empire, possessed a unique advantage. A cadre of astute merchants, financial pioneers, and a strategic geographic position that rendered its ports vital for international trade. However, Dutch traders found themselves at a disadvantage against the established dominance of Portugal and Spain, who had already secured lucrative routes to Asia. In response to this challenge, the Dutch government enacted a groundbreaking decision. It consolidated all private trading enterprises into a single, unified corporation, endowing it with extraordinary powers. This was more than a mere business venture. It represented an empire in corporate form. The VOC was vested with the legal authority to **establish colonies, raise armies, deploy warships, imprison adversaries, negotiate treaties with sovereigns, and execute criminals ***. It possessed the capacity to wage wars, levy taxes, and govern territories on behalf of the Dutch state. The true innovation, however, lay in the introduction of **public investment **. For the first time in history, ordinary citizens were granted the opportunity to purchase shares in a corporation. This allowed them to invest capital, anticipate returns, and trade shares among themselves. This revolutionary concept led to the establishment of the world's inaugural stock exchange, the Amsterdam Stock Exchange, and set the groundwork for modern capitalism. Within a single generation, the VOC emerged as a superpower. Its fleets traversed greater distances than any other maritime force, and its profits surpassed the GDP of entire nations. The VOC's influence indelibly shaped the trajectories of Asia, Europe, and global commerce. Yet, beneath this facade of extraordinary success lay a more somber reality. To truly understand the Dutch East India Company's power, we must examine the system it created, because VOC did not only dominate trade. It invented the financial world we live in today. Before VOC, business was simple. A few wealthy men would fund a voyage. A ship would travel to the east, buy goods, return home, sell them, and divide the profits. Each trip required new investors, new agreements, and new risks. If the ship sank or pirates attacked, the entire investment was gone forever. But VOC introduced an idea so revolutionary that it reshaped all global economics: permanent capital. Instead of funding a single voyage, investors bought long-term shares in the company itself. Their money didn't end with one trip. VOC used it to build an empire of continuous trade. The company could raise more money, scale its operations, build bigger fleets, and expand across continents without starting from scratch every time. The world's first stock exchange opened in Amsterdam, and for the first time, ordinary citizens, blacksmiths, merchants, bakers, even widows could own a piece of a global corporation. Shares could be bought, sold, or passed down to children. Prices fluctuated daily based on rumors, news, and market expectations. Stock trading was born. With this constant flow of money, VOC built a fleet of more than 150 ships, military and commercial combined. These ships were the lifeblood of the company. They carried spices, textiles, tea, porcelain, silver, and gold across thousands of miles. Each journey was dangerous, filled with storms, diseases, and enemy attacks. But VOC's financial strength allowed it to take risks no one else could. This new capitalist machine also needed organization. VOC introduced early forms of corporate governance. Boards of directors, annual financial reports. Dividends, auditors, long-term strategic planning. The world had never seen anything like this. It was a corporation more advanced than many modern companies today. But financial innovation wasn't the only thing that made VOC unstoppable. The company used its wealth to build private armies and naval forces, establishing a military presence that rivaled European empires. Wherever it went, VOC combined money, violence, and strategy to secure its dominance. By the mid-1600s, VOC had become the largest and most influential economic force on Earth. Yet the story of how it used this power and the consequences that followed reveals the true cost of building a trillion-dollar empire. Result: at first glance, the Dutch East India Company, known as VOC, appeared to be a mere trading enterprise. It imported spices, silks, tea, and other exotic goods from Asia, selling them at substantial profits in Europe. However, beneath this facade lay a formidable entity, a corporation wielding the power and influence akin to that of a nation-state. Backed by the Dutch government, VOC operated as a private empire, significantly impacting the politics and economies of vast regions. The VOC was granted a charter by the Dutch government, endowing it with extraordinary rights that transcended mere commercial privileges. These rights were not mere formalities, they were exercised with profound authority. VOC had the capability to construct forts and military installations, command armed forces, engage in both offensive and defensive military operations, forge alliances with foreign rulers, administer conquered territories, establish judicial systems, prisons, and legal frameworks, mint and circulate its own currency. In numerous regions of Asia, VOC transcended the role of a trading company. It functioned as the governing body. The company regulated trade, collected taxes, and determined the flow of people in and out of its territories, an unprecedented level of control for a corporation in history. The headquarters of VOC in Amsterdam, referred to as the VOC Chamber, resembled a governmental palace more than a commercial office. Within its walls, influential directors convened to strategize global ambitions, identifying target regions for conquest, eliminating competition, and manipulating local rulers. These decisions extended far beyond business interests. They fundamentally influenced international relations. VOC's primary focus was the spice-laden islands of Southeast Asia, now part of Indonesia, where cloves, nutmeg, and mace fetched prices in Europe that rivaled gold. The conquest of these islands signified not just control over trade, but access to immense wealth. However, VOC was not without adversaries. Portuguese traders had established a presence in the region, and local kingdoms resisted foreign domination. In response, VOC deployed naval fleets, soldiers, and mercenaries, engaging in fierce battles both at sea and on land. Islands were blockaded, ports seized, and Portuguese vessels destroyed. Through relentless and calculated efforts, VOC forged its monopoly. With each military triumph, VOC's power expanded. The company established fortified trading posts stretching from Cape Town to Batavia, modern-day Jakarta, enhancing its operational reach and military strength. VOC ships became ubiquitous across Asian waters, instilling fear in rivals and earning the respect of local rulers. Yet, this empire was not solely constructed through trade and diplomacy, it was also built on military might. The ascendance of VOC exacted a profound toll on the indigenous populations whose lands were occupied, resources exploited. To understand the true power of the Dutch East India Company, we must look at the system it engineered, one of the most advanced and efficient trade networks the world had ever seen. VOC didn't simply send ships back and forth. It built a global machine that operated with military precision, financial discipline, and ruthless ambition. At the heart of this machine was the VOC fleet. These ships were not ordinary vessels. They were marvels of 17th century engineering, large, heavily armed, capable of carrying vast amounts of cargo, and designed to survive months at sea. A typical VOC voyage from Amsterdam to Asia could take 7 to 9 months. Sailors faced storms, starvation, disease, and unpredictable oceans. Many never returned. Yet the profits from a single successful voyage were so immense that the company continued expanding its fleet relentlessly. VOC ships traveled along a carefully calculated route. From the Netherlands, they sailed around the southern tip of Africa, stopping at the company-controlled settlement at Cape Town. This port was crucial. It allowed ships to restock food, repair damage, and prepare for the long journey into the Indian Ocean. From there, VOC vessels split into different directions: the Spice Islands of the Moluccas, the rich trading hub of Batavia, the markets of India, the bustling ports of Japan, and the treasure-filled lands of China. Each of these destinations supplied something unique. Indonesia provided spices, cloves, nutmeg, and mace that VOC monopolized. India offered textiles, cotton, and dyes. China was home to silk and exquisite porcelain. Japan supplied silver, one of the most valuable metals in global commerce. VOC didn't just buy products, it controlled production. In many regions, the company forced farmers to grow only VOC-approved crops. Anyone who tried to trade with rival nations faced harsh punishments. This ensured that VOC remained the primary supplier of high-value goods to Europe. Once the ships returned home, the goods were auctioned publicly in Amsterdam. These auctions were massive events. Crowds gathered, prices soared, and fortunes were made overnight. The company kept meticulous records, monitoring everything from cargo weight to market fluctuations, creating one of the earliest forms of global data analysis. This sophisticated system made VOC unbeatable for decades. It mastered long-distance logistics, international bargaining, and resource extraction. It was more organized than any government of its time, more profitable than any kingdom, and more influential than any ruler. But behind this machinery was a darker truth. VOC's efficiency was built on exploitation. The company's ruthless pursuit of monopoly left deep scars across Asia, scars that still echo through history. Result: behind the celebrated achievements of the Dutch East India Company, known as VOC, lies a narrative often overlooked by history, a narrative steeped in exploitation, conflict, and profound human suffering. This story is not one of the investors who amassed fortunes, but rather of the countless individuals whose lands and lives were irrevocably altered in the relentless quest for profit. VOC was not merely a commercial enterprise. It functioned as a formidable force that reshaped societies, frequently employing methods of coercion and violence. In the Spice Islands, present-day Indonesia, VOC established one of history's most oppressive monopolies. Local kingdoms, once thriving and autonomous, were coerced into signing exclusive trade agreements under duress. When negotiations faltered, VOC resorted to military intervention, deploying warships and soldiers. Villages were razed, crops annihilated, and thousands were thrust into servitude to secure the company's dominance over valuable spices such as cloves, nutmeg, and mace. The belief that scarcity equated to value led VOC to systematically destroy spice trees, an act that wreaked havoc on local economies and communities. The Banda Islands exemplified the extreme brutality of VOC's regime. In response to local resistance against its monopolistic practices, the company initiated a military campaign that resulted in widespread slaughter. Those who survived faced enslavement or forced relocation, while the islands were repopulated with imported labor loyal to VOC. This marked one of the earliest instances of corporate-sponsored ethnic replacement aimed at ensuring unchallenged control over the spice trade, regardless of the human cost involved. In addition to military might, VOC engaged in political machinations, pitting local rulers against one another. The company adeptly shifted allegiances, supporting one monarch today and another tomorrow. Bribery, intimidation, and clandestine agreements became commonplace, allowing VOC to assume roles typically reserved for governments collecting taxes, enforcing laws, and dictating policies. The distinction between commerce and colonialism blurred to the point of disappearance. The company's operations were heavily reliant on a vast labor force, predominantly composed of enslaved individuals, prisoners, and impoverished workers from diverse regions including Africa, India, Indonesia, and parts of Europe. Within plantations, warehouses, and aboard ships, these laborers endured relentless hardships, disease, violence, and starvation. VOC's own records reveal a chilling perspective. Lives lost were merely seen as a cost of doing business. In stark contrast, the realities of this exploitation remained obscured from the European investors who reveled in substantial dividends, politicians who boasted of national prosperity, and a public that admired VOC's expansive global reach. The suffering that underpinned the profits was concealed behind a facade of maps. For nearly 2 centuries, the Dutch East India Company ruled the seas, controlled global trade, and overshadowed entire nations. But no empire, corporate or political, can sustain limitless expansion. Beneath the surface of VOC's success, weaknesses were forming. Slowly, quietly, almost invisibly, the world's mightiest company was beginning to rot from within. The first crack came from corruption. With power spread across thousands of miles and dozens of colonies, oversight became nearly impossible. Governors, officers, and merchants stationed in Asia often acted like kings themselves. They took bribes, manipulated trade, stole goods, and formed personal mini-empires. Many VOC officials profited more from corruption than from their salaries. The very structure that once made VOC efficient, its independence and autonomy, also became its greatest liability. Then came administrative bloat. VOC's operations were so vast that the company developed layers upon layers of bureaucracy. Reports had to be written, ships registered, goods counted, taxes recorded, disputes resolved by thousands of clerks and officers. Decisions were slow, delays were constant, and expenses grew relentlessly. The company was becoming too heavy to move, too complex to control. A major blow came from competition. Other European powers, especially the British, were no longer willing to let VOC dominate Asia. The British East India Company rose with astonishing speed, copying VOC's methods but executing them with better discipline and stronger military support. Britain's global ambitions collided directly with VOC's interests. Slowly, the British began winning control in India, securing trade networks, and outperforming VOC in efficiency. VOC also suffered from global economic changes. Demand for spices once worth more than gold began to decline. New sources of commodities reduced VOC's monopoly power. Prices fell, profits shrank, yet the company's massive expenses continued. VOC tried to expand into new markets like tea, textiles, and porcelain, but the competition was fierce. The cost of maintaining forts, armies, and fleets drained VOC's finances. Wars with rival European powers, rebellions in colonies, and rising security concerns added further burden. The company began borrowing heavily to stay afloat. Dividends were still paid to keep investors happy, but they came from loans, not profits. The final cracks emerged when the Dutch Republic itself weakened. Political chaos at home left VOC vulnerable. Without strong national support, its military and financial foundations collapsed. What was once a symbol of Dutch pride became a national liability. By the late 1700s, VOC was drowning in debt. The company that had once dominated the world's oceans was now unable to pay its own workers. The end was no longer a possibility, it was inevitable. Result, by the close of the 18th century, the Dutch East India Company, once a titan of maritime trade, found itself diminished and beleaguered. This was the same entity that had once commanded the seas, redefined continents, and amassed wealth rivaling today's trillion-dollar corporations. However, the once mighty VOC was now encumbered by debt, scandal, and internal strife, a gradual decline akin to a colossal vessel splintering under its own mass. The Dutch government, which had once been the staunchest ally of VOC, could no longer overlook the deepening crises. Investigative reports uncovered alarming levels of corruption. Shipments vanished without a trace. Officials embezzled funds for personal gain. Financial records were manipulated, with vital documents either falsified or systematically destroyed. Meanwhile, the governors in Asia indulged in opulence while the company's financial health deteriorated. Yet, corruption was merely one facet of the company's decline. The landscape of Europe was undergoing rapid transformation. Revolutions, wars, and shifting alliances unsettled the continent. The Dutch Republic grappled with political turmoil and economic stagnation. Simultaneously, Britain and France were aggressively expanding, undermining Dutch trade routes and eroding colonial dominance. The military prowess that had once instilled fear was now outdated. VOC's fleet was aging, its soldiers poorly funded, and its fortifications vulnerable. The company had expanded beyond its capacity to manage effectively, becoming too inflexible to adapt to the changing times. In 1780, the Fourth Anglo-Dutch War proved catastrophic. British forces specifically targeted Dutch and VOC vessels, crippling trade and inflicting severe losses on many of VOC's wealthiest colonies. The scant revenue that remained was consumed by the expenses of war and mounting interest on debts. Within the Netherlands, shareholders grew increasingly anxious. Dividends ceased and loans accumulated. What had once been a celebrated company now became a source of national disgrace. Politicians found themselves embroiled in heated debates over whether to salvage VOC or let it collapse. Some contended that its downfall would annihilate Dutch influence in Asia, while others viewed it as a corrupt relic of a bygone era. Ultimately, in 1799, the decision was reached. VOC would be dissolved. After nearly 2 centuries, the world's first megacorporation, once the most formidable commercial entity in history, was extinguished. Its territories, debts, ships, and remaining assets were absorbed by the Dutch government. However, the legacy of VOC did not perish with its dissolution. Its impact endured through the systems it pioneered: global trade networks, stock exchanges, multinational corporations, and the very concept of corporate power itself. Modern capitalism stands on the foundations laid centuries ago by VOC, reflecting both its innovations and its failures. Though the Dutch East India Company vanished more than 2 centuries ago, its shadow still stretches across our modern world. VOC's story is not just a tale of trade routes, spices, or distant colonies. It is the story of how today's global economy was born. Its successes and failures shaped the way nations, businesses, and markets operate even now. VOC introduced ideas that were centuries ahead of their time. The concept of publicly traded shares, which allows millions of people today to invest in companies, began with VOC. The stock exchange, where fortunes rise and fall in minutes, was created to trade VOC shares. Corporate governance, financial reporting, auditing, dividends, long-term investment strategies, all these principles emerged from VOC's operations. When you check a stock price, invest money, or watch companies rise and fall on financial news, you are witnessing systems that trace back directly to this 17th century supercorporation. But VOC's legacy is also a warning. With unheard of power came exploitation, violence, and moral consequences that history cannot ignore. The company's thirst for monopoly destroyed communities, disrupted ancient cultures, and reshaped entire regions of Asia. It demonstrated how a corporation, when given unchecked authority, can act like an imperial force, prioritizing profits over people. This dual legacy, innovation and exploitation, defines how we understand corporate power today. Modern multinationals control industries, influence governments, and shape global direction. But even the biggest companies of our era, Apple, Amazon, Google, Saudi Aramco, are still far smaller than VOC was at its peak. The idea that a single corporation could be worth over $7.9 trillion today feels extreme. Yet centuries ago, VOC reached that height with far less population, technology, or global connectivity. What made VOC so powerful was not only its wealth, it was its fusion of business and state. It blurred the line between corporate ambition and political authority. Its ships carried goods, but they also carried soldiers. Its trade agreements came with cannons. Its profits were intertwined with national identity, military expansion, and global domination. And yet, VOC's fall shows another truth: no company, no matter how large, is greater than the forces of history. Greed, corruption, competition, and political collapse brought down the world's most powerful corporation. Its story reveals the fragility hidden beneath even the strongest empires. Today, VOC survives only in archives, museums, and the systems it helped create. But its rise and fall remain a powerful reminder of how ambition can build worlds and how unchecked power can destroy them.